A 17-year-old black math prodigy solves a complex equation during class, only for the teacher to erase it silently, claiming this board is for real students. The class laughs. The equation? Weeks later, it appears under another student's name and wins a national award. But what Terrence does next, no one saw it coming. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The fluorescent lights of room 3C buzzed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow on the rows of students seated in the elite honors math class at Millstone High. It was third period on a Monday, the kind of morning where silence usually clung to the walls like a fog. But not today. Today the room buzzed with low chuckles and exchanged glances, the kind that never meant anything good. Mr. Dalton, the AP calculus teacher, stood at the front of the class, tapping a dry erase marker rhythmically against the board. Tall, trim, and white, he had a reputation for just joking when things crossed the line. A line he'd blurred so many times, no one really saw it anymore. Today he was in one of those moods. "All right, everyone," he said, cracking a smile as he erased yesterday's equation. "Let's start with a little humor, shall we?" He turned to the board and began scrawling something. At first it looked like a basic algebraic formula, but as the final symbols came together, the message snapped into place like a cruel puzzle being solved. XE intelligent. Y yay, money. ZZ value. If father X, janitor, then son, X. Underneath, in bold red marker, he wrote, "Solve for X, or should we just ask Terrence?" The room fell into stunned silence for a half second. Then came the laughter. Loud, unfiltered, echoing. Some students clutched their stomachs. A few high-fived, one even wiped tears from his eyes. Terrence Holloway sat frozen in the third row. 6'1", lanky but strong. Terrence wore his signature black hoodie, pulled slightly over his head, more out of habit than rebellion. But now that hoodie felt like a cage. His brown eyes didn't blink. His jaw didn't move. He just stared straight ahead, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Someone behind him whispered, "Guess janitor jeans don't code for calculus." He heard it, loud and clear. But he didn't flinch. To the rest of the room, it was just a clever joke, a math-based jab. But for Terrence, it was the sentence that tore a seam in his already threadbare confidence. He could feel the heat crawling up his neck, the sting of humiliation blooming across his chest, like an open wound. Mr. Dalton smirked, the kind of grin that danced on the edge of condescension. "Lighten up, class. We're just having some fun here. Besides, Terrence has a good sense of humor. Right, Terrence?" Terrence didn't answer. He didn't move. The silence after the laughter was even louder. Every second that passed made the room feel more like a stage, and he was the only one under the spotlight. Not for brilliance, not for talent, just for being the son of a man who swept floors after hours. That was the real joke. That was the equation they'd all solved. Black father pull blue uniform, EL, son of a nobody. A flicker of movement caught Terrence's eye. A phone screen. Someone had taken a photo of the board. Another kid was already typing, probably captioning it. He didn't need to see what the caption was. He already knew. The equation was about to go viral. A slow burn began behind his eyes. But it wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something colder, more focused. Terrence had heard the laughter before. At recess. At the bus stop. During parent-teacher conferences where Ronald, his father, stood in uniform while white fathers wore ties and took calls from corner offices. He'd been hearing that laughter since 4th grade, but never like this. He thought about his father's face that morning, wrinkled at the brow, calloused hands handing him a peanut butter sandwich, and muttering, "Keep your chin up, all right? Don't let him see you sweat." Terrence's chin was not up. "Come on, let's solve it," Mr. Dalton said, gesturing to the equation like it was nothing more than a warm-up problem. "Anyone? No?" The room was still. No one dared add to the joke. Not because they felt guilty, but because the thrill had passed. The kill had been made. The predator had moved on. But Terrence didn't move. Not yet. Instead, he slowly stood. Every movement, deliberate. The chair legs scraped the floor, harsh and metallic, slicing through the silence. His sneakers whispered against the tile as he walked to the front of the class. The room watched, suddenly unsure if this was still funny or if the air had shifted. Mr. Dalton raised an eyebrow, half amused. "Terrence, you got something you'd like to contribute?" Terrence took the marker from Mr. Dalton's hand without asking. He didn't say a word. He turned to the board. The joke equation was still there. That bold red line, then sun x e, seemed to pulse like a challenge. Terence wiped part of it clean. Then, in tight, clean strokes, he began to write. Not just numbers, not just variables. He began solving. At first, it looked like gibberish to most. Multi-layered equations, integration techniques, tensor notations, gradients that belonged in a college lecture hall, not a high school classroom. Letters turned to symbols, turned to graphs. The math spiraled upward in complexity, like a storm brewing on the board. Students stared, unsure whether to laugh or ask what he was doing. Mr. Dalton's smirk had vanished. His arms were now crossed, expression unreadable. In exactly 2 minutes, Terence stepped back from the board, and underneath his final equation, he wrote just one line. The value of x is not inherited. It's proven. He capped the marker, turned around, and walked silently back to his seat. The room was dead quiet. Even the projector stopped humming, as if it too was holding its breath. Terence didn't need to explain the math. He didn't care if they understood it. Not yet. That wasn't the point. His silence had never been about weakness. It had been about power, about waiting for the right moment, about letting them laugh, so he could shatter them with silence. But as he sat down, something flickered at the edge of his vision. One of the students had recorded the entire thing. Not just the joke, the entire moment, from Dalton's joke to the equation. Terence wrote. And now, it was already being sent. The viral joke was about to meet its counterstrike. But as Terence reached for his notebook, something unexpected happened. A text popped up on his cracked phone screen, from an unknown number. He just got our attention. Don't stop. His hand froze. The number had an MIT area code. As the class sat in stunned silence, none of them noticed what Terence had written in tiny script at the bottom corner of the board. A symbol, an equation, and a signature that didn't belong to any known mathematician. Because it hadn't been discovered yet. The sound of a vacuum echoed down the empty hallways of Millstone High. The same corridors that buzzed with teenage laughter hours earlier were now hollow, lit only by the dim flicker of ceiling lights. The smell of disinfectant lingered in the air, sharp, sterile, unforgiving. Ronald Holloway moved slowly, methodically, his broad frame bending over the mop, as though each stroke carried the weight of an invisible burden. His security badge, worn and faded, caught the faint light with every movement. His uniform shirt, once navy blue, had been washed so many times it had faded to gray, yet he wore it neatly, ironed, with his name tag still shining. Ronald. It wasn't pride in the job, it was pride in himself. A man who'd made peace with the world's cruelty by refusing to let it define him. But tonight, that peace was beginning to slip. He'd heard whispers during his shift change. Students laughing about the equation kid. He didn't need to ask who. He'd known instantly. The son of the janitor was always an easy target. When the laughter of the day became the silence of the night, Ronald cleaned the evidence of it. The gum stuck under desks, the scuff marks on lockers, the faint ghost of chalk dust left behind by careless hands. His son's classroom was room 3. He stopped at the door for a moment, hand hovering over the handle. He'd cleaned this room for 6 years. The desks, the whiteboard, the trash cans, all familiar, almost intimate. But tonight, the air felt different. He could feel it before he stepped inside. When he pushed open the door, the faint smell of dry erase ink greeted him. On the far wall, the board was still covered in faint traces of an equation half wiped away. Terence's equation, the one that had left the class stunned. A few leftover numbers lingered near the corner, ghostly remnants of something far bigger than anyone realized. Ronald stared at it for a long time, broom in hand, before exhaling slowly. He didn't understand the math, but he understood pain, and he recognized the silence that followed humiliation. The kind of silence his son had come home with lately. That quiet that wasn't tiredness but suppression. Ronald had seen it before in men who'd learned to swallow rage to survive. He began sweeping, the bristles whispering across the tile. His reflection shimmered faintly in the window. A man cleaning the classroom where his child's spirit had been stepped on. When he finished, he didn't leave right away. He sat down in one of the empty desks. Terence's desk. The wood was scarred with pen marks, initials and scratches. But Ronald saw something else. The faint outline of numbers carved into the side with a compass point. Equations, calculation, proof that even in silence, His son had been thinking, creating, reaching for something higher. He smiled faintly, pride cutting through his exhaustion like a spark. "That's my boy," he whispered. But as quickly as it came, the smile faded. Because pride didn't protect against cruelty. Pride didn't erase laughter. The Holloway apartment sat above a laundromat 2 miles from the school. The walls were thin. The heater made a rattling noise every few minutes, and the smell of detergent never quite left the air. But it was home. Simple, cramped, and filled with the echoes of perseverance. When Ronald got in after midnight, Terrence was still awake. The glow of a laptop screen illuminated his face. He was staring blankly, not typing, just watching the cursor blink on a blank page. "You should be asleep, son," Ronald said softly, setting his gloves on the counter. Terrence didn't answer. Ronald took a slow breath, his voice patient but firm. "You heard me, right?" "Yeah," Terrence murmured finally, his voice low. "Wasn't sleepy." Ronald looked at him for a moment. There was a heaviness in his son's posture, the kind that didn't come from physical fatigue. The boy's shoulders sagged, but his eyes were alive, restless, haunted. "You had a rough day?" Ronald asked tearfully, sitting across from him. Terrence shrugged. "Just school." "That's not an answer." Terrence hesitated. His lips parted like he might speak, but then he stopped. The words hovered in his throat, heavy with something that couldn't quite escape. Ronald reached across the table, his rough hand resting gently on Terrence's wrist. "Son, listen to me. You ain't less than nobody. You hear? I don't care what they say, what they laugh about. You got something they don't. You got truth. And truth don't need applause." Terrence's eyes flicked up. There was love there, but also something sharper. Doubt. He looked at his father's uniform. The name tag. The sweat stains that no washing machine could erase. His father's truth was built on dignity. But Terrence was beginning to wonder if dignity was just a slower way to be broken. "You ever get tired of being the one who takes it?" Terrence asked quietly. Ronald blinked. "Takes what?" "Everything," Terrence said. "The looks. The jokes. The way people act like you're invisible. The way they treat you like you don't belong, like you're part of the floor you clean." The room went silent. Ronald leaned back, exhaling through his nose. He'd never heard that edge in his son's voice before. Not anger, not defiance, but a kind of disillusionment that scared him more than rage. "Yeah," Ronald said finally, his voice low. "I get tired, but tired ain't the same as done." Terrence didn't answer. He just stared at the wall, where the faint reflection of the laptop screen flickered like distant lightning. Ronald stood, walked to the small counter, and poured himself a glass of water. The faucet groaned, spitting before the stream steadied. His reflection in the metal sink looked older than he remembered. Weary, but he still wore the same calm he'd built over decades. The calm that had kept him alive in a world that saw his kind as background noise. Behind him, Terrence closed the laptop and stood abruptly. "I'm going to bed." Ronald turned to respond, but his son was already gone, his bedroom door closing with a soft click. The apartment fell quiet again, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant honk from the street below. Ronald stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. He'd raised his son to be proud, to be strong, to rise above. But now, watching him pull away, he wondered if pride was enough anymore. Later, as Ronald folded his uniform for the next day, he noticed Terrence's backpack slumped near the couch. The zipper was half open, papers spilling slightly from the top. Absent-mindedly, he began to gather them, worksheets, scribbled notes, graph paper filled with complex symbols he didn't understand. Then something else fell out. A crumpled piece of notebook paper, folded over several times. The edges were torn, the center smeared with pencil. Ronald smoothed it out with careful fingers. And it was a drawing, a cruel cartoon. It showed a stick figure of a black janitor holding a mop, next to a smaller stick figure with exaggerated lips, labeled "Son of the Floor." Above it, written in a sharp, mocking scrawl, was, "Like father, like son, both cleaning up after us." At the bottom, in thick marker, was a small smiley face, and a signature. "Mr. Dalton." Ronald's chest tightened. His fingers trembled around the paper. He looked toward Terrence's closed door, his mind racing between disbelief and fury. Not the kind that shouted, but the kind that carved deep, silent scars. He sat down slowly on the couch, the note trembling in his hands, the uniform shirt still folded neatly beside him. For the first time in years, his calm cracked. He whispered to himself, "What did they do to my boy? Outside, a police siren wailed somewhere in the distance, faint, fading, but eerily timed. The night pressed closer. The silence inside the apartment grew heavy, suffocating. As Ronald stared at the hateful cartoon, his phone buzzed with a notification, an email from the school. The subject line read, "Disciplinary notice, Terrence Holloway." The next morning, the air at Millstone High carried a strange electricity, a tension that spread faster than rumor itself. By 7:45 a.m., the school hallways were already vibrating with whispers, phone screens glowing like tiny spotlights in the dim morning light. The video of Terrence standing at the board, silent, composed, unknowingly historic, had found its way onto TikTok, Reddit, Twitter, and even Snapchat within 12 hours. But it wasn't the version Terrence would have wanted the world to see. The clip had been edited, trimmed, rearranged, stripped of context. It began not with Mr. Dalton's joke, but with Terrence standing alone at the board, his hood up, writing rapidly while the words "Who does he think he is?" echoed in the captions. The tone of the video wasn't admiration, it was mockery disguised as fascination. By lunchtime, the post had hit 300. The top comment read, "Math thug trying to act like Einstein." Another said, "Son of the janitor thinking he's a genius. Bro, mop the floor instead." The laughter that had started in one classroom had now metastasized into a global chorus. In the teacher's lounge, coffee steamed in paper cups while laughter echoed behind closed doors. A few staff members scrolled the clip, shaking their heads with smirks that reeked of superiority. "Kids these days," one murmured. "Everything's racism now." Mr. Dalton chuckled softly from the corner, pretending to sound weary. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like that. I was just trying to lighten the mood." "Of course you were," said another teacher, stirring sugar into her mug. "He's a sensitive kid, that's all. Some of them can't take a joke." Dalton smirked. "He's fine. His dad works here. I'm sure he's used to cleaning up messes." The room laughed. No one noticed the janitor cart outside the door. No one saw Ronald Holloway standing there, frozen, a trash bag in one hand, a mop handle in the other. He had stopped only because he'd heard his own name. Now, hearing the rest, he couldn't breathe. The bag slipped from his hand, crumpling softly against the tile. He didn't move. He didn't knock. He just listened, to the laughter, to the arrogance, to the venom wrapped in polite tones. Then he walked away. Slowly, quietly, dignity intact, but bleeding invisibly with every step. Terrence, meanwhile, sat in his classroom later that day, trying to ignore the stares that followed him everywhere. His desk was the only one without someone sitting near it. Even those who used to talk to him avoided eye contact now, afraid of being caught in whatever storm was building around him. Every vibration of his phone felt like a sting. He'd stopped opening notifications hours ago. They came too fast to read, too cruel to process. He scrolled once, just to see. Equation boy gets humble. How do you spell irrelevant? Terren. He probably cheated off ChatGPT. He stopped scrolling. His hand trembled as he shoved the phone deep into his backpack. At the front of the room, Mr. Dalton lectured as if nothing had happened. His voice droned about quadratic limits and rate of change, but no one was listening. Every few seconds, someone's phone lit up with a new notification, another repost, another meme, another reminder that Terrence had become a joke the world couldn't stop telling. A whisper from the back cut through the monotony. "Hey, someone made merch of him." Terrence's stomach dropped. He turned slightly, just enough to see two boys scrolling through an online store, shirts printed with his face, and the word "Solve for X" under it, a cruel twist of his moment of courage. Mr. Dalton said nothing. He saw it, and he said nothing. Terrence's pen snapped in half between his fingers. Ink spread across his palm like a dark bloom. At home, Ronald sat at the small kitchen table, the same one where they'd eaten dinner for years, now covered in bills, cleaning schedules, and one printed email, the disciplinary notice from the school. It accused Terrence of creating classroom disruptions and causing distress to peers. He read it 3 times, each word carving deeper into his chest. His hands shook as he dialed the number at the bottom. When the secretary answered, Ronald spoke carefully, his tone steady but strained. "Ma'am, I'm calling about my son, Terrence Holloway. I just received—" "Hold, please." Music. Then a click. Then the voice of the principal. Smooth, formal, distant. "Mr. Holloway. Yes, we're aware of the situation. I assure you, we're looking into it." Ronald's jaw tightened. Looking into what? My boy got humiliated in your classroom, and now you're calling him disruptive? Mr. Dalton's report indicates that Terrence escalated the situation by writing inappropriate material on the board.
Inappropriate?
Ronald's voice cracked, louder now. You mean math? My son wrote math. A pause. Then carefully. Sir, we have to consider the environment. The video has caused significant disruption. We can't control how people online interpret it. Ronald's hand clenched the phone so tight his knuckles turned white. Then control your teachers. Control the ones laughing about it. Mr. Holloway, please. The line went dead. He'd been hung up on. He sat there for a moment, the silence roaring in his ears, before setting the phone down slowly on the table. In that moment, something inside him hardened. Not rage. Something sharper. Resolve. That night, Terrence didn't eat dinner. He sat on his bed, laptop open, watching as the view count on the video ticked past 1 million. Every second, new comments appeared. Some defended him. Most didn't. Then, suddenly, a new clip appeared in the feed. Different from the others, it had no captions, no edits, no music, just a raw, uncut 30 seconds of footage. It started with Mr. Dalton's equation. The racist joke. The laughter. The moment Terrence stood. The silence. The writing. The sentence at the end. The value of X is not inherited. It's proven. Posted by A Anonymous Truth. No hashtags. No commentary. Just the caption. Watch carefully before you laugh. Within an hour, it had 50,000 views. Then 200,000. Then 500,000. The narrative began to shift. Commenters noticed the original joke. The cruelty. The silence from the teacher. The power of what Terrence had written. Threads appeared on Reddit dissecting his equation. Mathematicians chimed in, calling it remarkable. Others called it a once-in-a-generation mind. For the first time, the internet's laughter faltered. But Millstone High didn't flinch. By the next morning, they issued a brief statement. We are aware of a social media incident involving a student. Millstone High values diversity and mutual respect. The matter is being reviewed internally. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just words crafted to protect their own. Terrence saw it on his phone before school. He read it twice, then turned off the screen. His reflection stared back at him. Tired eyes, hollow cheeks, a face learning what injustice looked like when painted with bureaucracy. He looked at his father sitting quietly across the table, already in uniform, hands wrapped around his thermos of black coffee. Their eyes met for a moment. No words passed between them, but both knew. They were fighting a system designed not to punish cruelty, but to erase accountability. By midday, something new began circulating online. A still frame from the anonymous video, zoomed in on the lower corner of the whiteboard. A faint symbol, barely visible, but there. People began speculating wildly. Some said it was a hidden equation. Others thought it was an intentional mark, a mathematical message left behind. Within hours, Reddit threads titled Terrence's Code exploded in popularity. Conspiracy theorists, professors, even tech enthusiasts began decoding it, trying to make sense of what it meant. For the first time, Terrence wasn't just a joke. He was a mystery. But mysteries attract attention, and not all of it kind. By evening, reporters began contacting the school. Cameras showed up at the front gate, and no one knew who leaked Terrence's full name, address, and photo. The meme had turned into doxing. And once again, the laughter returned, this time sharper, more dangerous. Terrence shut his laptop and sank onto his bed, the walls closing in around him. He whispered to himself, "They'll never let me just be me." But outside his door, his father heard the words, and something in Ronald's chest cracked for good. Cliffhanger. That night, a new account appeared online, same username as before, only this time it posted a single cryptic video. Terrence's classroom, the chalkboard glowing under the lights, and a text overlay that read, "The truth behind Terrence's silence, coming soon." The video ended with the sound of a pen writing on a whiteboard, and 3 faint letters. THX night at the Holloway apartment was never quiet anymore. The old radiator hissed, the pipes rattled, and outside, the sounds of cars bleeding through the thin walls felt louder now that silence had become heavy with scrutiny. The internet had made Terrence famous in all the wrong way. What once was anonymity had become a microscope. Every move he made was judged, dissected, ridiculed. But inside that chaos, another truth had been quietly taking shape, one the world was never meant to see. Terence wasn't just smart. He was extraordinary. Long before the equation that silenced his class, he had been solving problems no high school curriculum dared touch. In the solitude of his room, a cramped space barely big enough for a desk, a twin bed, and a flickering lamp, Terence had built a universe of thought. Lined on his walls were pages filled with numbers, graphs, and strange notations that even his teachers wouldn't recognize. He'd been working in silence for years, training his mind like a machine, not for recognition, but for understanding. The notebooks stacked under his bed weren't filled with homework. They were filled with dreams. Dreams written in symbols. Equations that tried to explain movement, symmetry, chaos. All the things that never made sense in the world around him. It started when he was 12. While other kids played games or posted on social media, Terence found comfort in online math forums. He'd lurk under usernames like ThetaGhost and QuantMind, dropping comments on problems that baffled even graduate students. His replies were concise, almost surgical. He didn't brag, didn't argue. He just solved. Sometimes his answers would get noticed, followed by replies like, "Who are you?" or "This is genius-level work." But he never answered. He didn't need validation. Not when the same people mocking him in class couldn't see beyond their own reflections. He'd applied twice for the school's gifted and advanced STEM program. Both times he'd aced the entrance tests. Both times he'd been rejected. The reason, as listed in the email, behavioral observations and teacher input suggest candidate may not demonstrate leadership or classroom adaptability appropriate for advanced placement. Behavioral observations. The same phrase that had kept countless kids like him outside closed doors. The same coded language used to say, "He's not one of us." Ronald had fought it quietly, attending every meeting, requesting every appeal. But the system didn't bend. They'd let Terence sit in honors, but never in gift. "He needs more maturity," one teacher had told Ronald in the hallway once, in a voice too polished to sound hateful, but too practiced to be innocent. Ronald had only nodded, holding back the words burning in his throat. Now years later, Terence was building what none of them could imagine, an idea that reached beyond the walls of any classroom. He worked through nights, his pencil scratched across paper like a whisper of rebellion. On the desk beside him, a second-hand laptop hummed softly. The glow of code and complex formulas flickered on his screen. He had no mentor, no tutor, no validation, only obsession. And yet, the more he worked, the more something began to change in him. The humiliation, the ridicule, the viral mockery. It no longer broke him. It refined him. He no longer wanted to prove them wrong. He wanted to prove the truth, that genius had no uniform, no pedigree, no permission slip. Downstairs, Ronald sat at the kitchen table again, polishing his work boots for the morning shift. His eyes lingered on the door to Terence's room. He could hear the faint tapping of keys, the quiet shuffle of papers. It worried him. The late nights, the silence, the absence of laughter. But when he knocked earlier, Terence had just said almost done. Done with what? Ronald didn't know. Sometimes, he'd peek inside. He'd see a dozen pages taped to the wall, lines connecting numbers like spiderwebs. He didn't understand a bit of it, but he recognized the fire in his son's eyes, the same fire Ronald once had when he believed the world was fair. He wanted to tell Terence that it didn't matter, that life had a way of humbling even the brightest minds. But each time, he held his tongue, because what kind of father tells his child not to hope? By midnight, the glow from Terence's laptop painted his face in blue. He leaned back, eyes bloodshot, staring at an equation sprawled across 4 pages. It wasn't just math anymore. It was art. The lines, the symmetry, the balance. It felt like music on paper. He was building something theoretical, a model that connected entropy, gravity, and nonlinear equations in a way he couldn't even fully explain yet. But he felt it, deep in his chest, like truth vibrating under his skin. He saved the file as Holloway Theorem V12, and leaned back in his chair exhausted. For a moment he smiled. Then his computer froze. The cursor stopped moving. The file name flickered, then disappeared. The screen went black. "What the?" he whispered, clicking frantically. The computer restarted itself. Lines of code flashed across the screen. He didn't recognize any of it. Then, a white box appeared. "Uploading." Terence's stomach dropped. He yanked the Wi-Fi cable from the wall, but it didn't stop. The bar kept climbing. He tried to shut the laptop. It wouldn't close. The hinge locked. His hands trembled as he hit every key, but the screen kept moving. Then the upload window disappeared, replaced by a browser tab. Reddit.com. R Math Genius. His username, ThetaGhost. And below it his latest file. The Holloway equation draft posted publicly. His chest tightened. His hands went cold. He hadn't posted it. Someone had hacked his account. He stared, disbelief washing over him as comments began to appear within minutes. What is this? Is this real? The symmetry looks impossible. Whoever wrote this, they're either insane or brilliant. He scrolled further. His name, Terrence H., was in the corner of one screenshot, from a file tag he thought no one would ever see. Within an hour, the post had 10,000 upvotes. Reddit's math forums were in chaos. Professors and data scientists debated in real time. Some called it plagiarism. Others called it revolutionary. Someone linked the video from TikTok, the equation kid, and suddenly, it clicked for everyone watching. They realized who he was. The boy mocked in class. The son of the janitor. He wasn't just some kid. He was the author of something they couldn't understand. Terrence sat there, staring at the screen, heart racing. He didn't know whether to be terrified or proud. His world had just split open. Then, at 3:14 a.m., a notification popped up. A private message from a verified academic account. Dr. Ellen Westcott, Harvard University. This changes everything. Who are you? He stared at the words, frozen. The cursor blinked beneath her question, waiting for a reply. He didn't type one. He couldn't. Because in the bottom right corner of his screen, something new was flashing. An email alert. From Anonymous Truth. Subject. We told you not to stop. As Terrence sat trembling before the glowing screen, a new Reddit post appeared under his username. One he hadn't written. It read, "The next proof comes from what they tried to erase. Stay tuned." And attached was a photo of Millstone High's chalkboard. The same one from that day, with a new equation drawn across it. Only this time, the signature wasn't his. It was his father's name. The world had seen Terrence Holloway's equation, but few saw the deeper equation unfolding behind it, the invisible math that controlled who got to be seen and who got erased. As the Reddit threads exploded and scholars debated, a parallel conversation began beneath the surface. It was happening in the quiet DMs of black mathematicians, in hushed Zoom calls among underfunded STEM students of color, and inside email chains that had long been ignored by the academic elite. Because Terrence's brilliance wasn't an isolated miracle. It was the product of a pattern, one that had been suppressed, denied, and dismissed for generations. At the University of Chicago, Dr. Naomi Brooks stared at her screen in silence. The Holloway equation sat open in front of her, symbols that danced with elegance and clarity, concepts that mirrored her own early work in non-Euclidean topology, but with an entirely new structural twist. She wasn't surprised that a black teenager had written it. She was furious that no one at Millstone High had ever noticed him. She'd seen it too many times, promising young black minds, overlooked not because of ability, but because of something far more calculated, institutional neglect, masked as academic standards. She opened a private Slack group of black STEM scholars and typed, "He's not alone. We need to expose this pattern. This is bigger than one kid." At Millstone High, the administration scrambled to manage the optics. They issued a second statement, this one longer, filled with vague language about equity in education and inclusive learning environments. But behind closed doors, their concerns weren't about Terrence's well-being. They were about reputation, donations, and control. Principal Hargrave sat in his office, flanked by 2 school board members and the district's legal counsel. "We can't let this become a racial narrative," one board member said, not realizing the irony. "It already is," the lawyer replied flatly. "A Harvard professor just tweeted that our curriculum failed a prodigy. This is going national." Hargrave rubbed his temples. "What do we do? Distance ourselves from the teacher," someone said. "Reframe the situation as an isolated incident." "We spin it. Do we even know how he got so good at math?" another board member asked. "Like, who taught him this?" They all looked at each other. No one had an answer. Because no one had asked. But someone was asking now. Her name was Rachel Wynn, a mid-level journalist at a progressive online news outlet, Common Angle. She was known for digging into niche education stories that other reporters ignored. When she first saw the Holloway equation trending, she thought it was just another internet moment. But then she read the comments, the way the school handled it, The casual racism from classmates. The rejection from the gifted program despite perfect scores. The more she dug, the more the numbers pointed not to genius, but to gatekeeping. Rachel didn't just want to report a story. She wanted to uncover it. She spent the next 12 hours calling former Millstone students, mostly black and brown kids who'd quietly transferred or dropped advanced math classes without much noise. What she found was chillingly consistent. I was told I wasn't focused enough, even though I had a... They said I lacked natural leadership, whatever that means. They said I didn't fit the gifted profile. Again and again, the same coded language. Behavioral. Attitude. Maturity. Adaptability. The hidden math of exclusion. At the Holloway apartment, Ronald sat across from Terrence again, the table between them now buried in mail, scribbled notes, and half-eaten toast. Neither had slept properly. I didn't post the equation, Terrence finally said, voice low. Someone hacked it. Ronald nodded. But it's out now. Yeah. And I'm getting DMs from professors and trolls at the same time. Ronald leaned forward. Son, this thing is bigger than you. What you wrote, it woke people up. Some folks are scared. That's why they're trying to flip it back on you. Terrence looked tired. It's math, Dad. It's just numbers. No, Ronald said. It's history. And history ain't just written in books. Sometimes it's in numbers too. There was a knock at the door. Terrence flinched. Ronald moved to open it. Standing in the hallway was a woman in jeans and a blazer, holding a press badge clipped to her collar. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, her expression calm but urgent. Ronald Holloway? She asked. Yes. My name is Rachel Wynn. I'm a journalist with Common Angle. I've been following your son's story. I think it's time the world heard the real version. Not the meme, not the spin, the truth. Ronald hesitated. His instinct was to protect, to shut the door and shield his son. But something in Rachel's voice wasn't opportunistic. It was personal, honest. He glanced back at Terrence, who had stepped into the hallway. Rachel looked at him and said, I don't want to tell people what you are. I want to ask you how they missed it. Terrence blinked. They didn't miss it. They ignored it. Rachel nodded slowly. Then let's make sure they can't anymore. While Terrence and Rachel sat down for the first recorded interview in the kitchen, somewhere else across the country, another conversation was happening. One that would shift the course of everything. Inside a tall glass building at Harvard University, Professor Ellen Westcott sat with two colleagues, eyes glued to a whiteboard filled with parts of Terrence's proof. This isn't just new, she whispered. It's disruptive. Her colleague, a tenured professor who'd spent years on mathematical models that now seemed inadequate, stared at the work with growing unease. If this kid is real, he muttered, then a lot of people in our field have a problem. Ellen turned to him. We've always had a problem. We just didn't want to admit who we were excluding. They were no longer debating if Terrence was a genius. The question now was, how had a system this advanced failed to recognize him? Or worse, refused to? Because math was never neutral. The numbers may not lie, but the people interpreting them always had. As Rachel uploaded the first snippet of her interview later that night, a raw video of Terrence saying, "They didn't want me in the room," a ripple effect began online. More students from other schools came forward. Hidden genius trended for the first time. Thousands began sharing stories of being discouraged, ignored, or quietly dropped from advanced programs. The stories weren't just about racism. They were about erasure. Teachers who downplayed intelligence if it came in the wrong skin. Administrators who said not ready without ever testing. It wasn't personal bias. It was institutionalized filtration. And Terrence had become the spotlight no one could turn off. The next morning, as Ronald walked through the school parking lot for his early shift, a man in a navy suit stepped out of a black car and stopped him. "Mr. Holloway?" Ronald turned slowly. "Who's asking?" The man handed him a card. "Joseph Langston, MIT admissions liaison. I'm here to speak with your son. We've been watching, and we're ready to offer him a direct path into our institute, full scholarship, immediate mentorship." Ronald's heart stopped for a second. Why now?
Langston hesitated.
Because sometimes, brilliance has to fight its way through a system built to keep it quiet. Your son's done that. We'd like to see how far he can go when someone's actually listening. Ronald took the card, staring at it as if it were a fragile miracle. He didn't cry, but something inside him melted. Pride mixed with pain, with years of invisible battles finally surfacing. Back inside the apartment, Rachel received a strange email from an unlisted address, with one attachment, a document titled, Millstone Internal Memo. Gifted Program Exclusion Criteria. She opened it. At the bottom, handwritten in black ink, was one note. Terrence wasn't the first. He just refused to disappear. Rachel Wynne had always believed that journalism was about chasing truth. But now she realized that truth didn't always hide in the dark. Sometimes it hid in plain sight. Behind smiles, behind polite meetings, behind people like Miss Dalton. She had spent 3 days calling the school district, requesting interviews, filing formal records requests. Every time she mentioned Dalton's name, the tone on the other end of the line changed. Tight, cautious, evasive. Mr. Dalton has been a respected educator here for over 16 years, the district representative told her over the phone. We don't comment on personnel matters. Respectable. That word again. The kind that built walls instead of opening doors. But Rachel wasn't the type to stop at walls. That night, sitting in her car parked outside Millstone High, she scrolled through an anonymous email that had landed in her inbox earlier. The subject line read simply, "You want the real Dalton? Check the archives." The email contained one attachment, a PDF of internal complaint logs. As she opened it, the screen glowed faintly in the dark car, illuminating her face with a pale bluish light. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning line after line. There it was, a pattern. A student felt uncomfortable after racially insensitive comment during class discussion. Parent requested class transfer after teacher made inappropriate remark regarding family occupation. Teacher advised me to attend a cultural sensitivity workshop. Declined. The entries stretched back over 9 years. Each time the result was the same. Matter addressed internally. No disciplinary action necessary. It was systemic, quiet protection wrapped in bureaucratic phrasing. Rachel exhaled, the fog from her breath misting the windshield. They had covered for him. Again and again. At that same moment, inside his neatly kept suburban home, Mr. Dalton sat at his dining table, laptop open, whiskey glass beside him. His phone buzzed with notifications, emails, mentions, articles beginning to question his professionalism. He scrolled through the comments under an education blog headline. Viral math video sparks debate on teacher bias. Some defended him, others demanded his firing. He clicked on one that read, "If you joke about a janitor's son being dumb, you're not a teacher, you're a bully with tenure." His hand tightened around the glass. He told himself he'd done nothing wrong. It had just been humor. A harmless joke. He'd meant to connect, to lighten the room. Not insult. That's what he told himself. The same way he told himself that black students transferring out of his classes was just coincidence. He thought about the one who'd cried in class sophomore year, the one who said he made her feel small. He'd written that off too. Overly sensitive, he'd called it in his notes. He leaned back, the chair creaking beneath him. His reflection in the window looked tired, but not guilty. That's what frightened him most, that he still didn't feel guilty. Meanwhile, Rachel had arranged to meet a former Millstone student named Kayla Moore, now a freshman at Howard University. They met at a coffee shop 2 towns away, the kind with soft jazz and old books lining the walls. Kayla's eyes burned with something fierce and unresolved. "I tried to report him," she said, stirring her drink absently. "Junior year, I was the only black girl in his AP class. He used to say things like, 'You're so articulate' every time I answered a question, like it was a compliment." Rachel listened silently, recording every word. "He'd joke about my hair when I came in with braids." Kayla continued. "That must have taken a while, huh? Like I was a spectacle. And when I told the counselor, they said, 'Mr. Dalton's old-fashioned, but he means well.'" "Did anyone ever follow up?" Kayla shook her head. "No. But they did move me into regular math after that. Said the environment might be less stressful." Rachel's throat tightened. Less stressful for who? Kayla smiled bitterly. Exactly. By the time Rachel returned to her hotel that night, she had dozens of statements, old emails, and screenshots, all painting the same picture. Dalton wasn't an anomaly. He was the product of protection. Millstone High's administration had chosen silence over accountability. And silence had a pattern too. She pieced the data together, building a timeline. Every complaint that had been minimized. Every sensitivity training he'd skipped. Every note written in the margins of student evaluations describing him as condescending, dismissive, or intimidating. There was even one handwritten memo from years ago. Concern raised by staff re Dalton's classroom culture. Advised to modify tone around minority students. No follow-up. No record of change. The entire system had smirked and moved on. The next day, Rachel met with Ronald again. This time in the break room of the building where he cleaned floors every night. He sat across from her, hands clasped, exhaustion radiating from his eyes. "You found something, didn't you?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "More than I expected. Complaints going back years. Ignored, buried. He's done this before, Ronald. To other kids." Ronald's jaw clenched. "And they just kept him in that classroom." "Yes, because people like him don't scare them," he said. "People like my son do." Rachel looked at him, the stoic janitor who carried his dignity like armor. There was no hatred in his tone, just clarity. "Can I use your words in my article?" she asked softly. Ronald hesitated, then nodded. "Tell them everything. Just don't make my boy a symbol. Make him human." Rachel's throat tightened, but she nodded again. "I will." That evening she sat in her car outside the school, watching through the windshield as the teachers left one by one. Dalton emerged last, briefcase in hand, glancing around nervously before hurrying to his car. Rachel's phone buzzed. A message. No sender, just a file link. Her heart jumped. The subject line read, "Faculty Group Chat, Millstone Staff Lounge." She hesitated, fingers trembling, then tapped the link. The screen lit up with a stream of messages. A private conversation among 10 staff members. At first it was mundane. Gossip about schedules, lesson plans, cafeteria complaints. Then came the jokes, memes, racist caricatures, a photo of Terrence's face from the viral video crudely edited next to a mop and bucket. The caption read, "Future Employee of the Month." Another meme, a fake math problem. "If a janitor's son can solve X, how long until he cleans up his father's mess?" Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. It wasn't just Dalton. It was the system laughing with him. Each message was time-stamped. Some were recent. Others were months old. The usernames matched verified staff emails. Then, at the bottom, one comment made her blood run cold. "Admin says don't worry, we'll handle the narrative. Keep smiling in interviews." Rachel stared at the message, her reflection glowing in the phone screen. The words burned into her mind. "Keep smiling." She hit download on the entire thread, her hands shaking. The file size was large, too large to fake. The silence of the car pressed in around her. This wasn't just bias, it was a conspiracy of comfort. And for the first time, Rachel realized that telling Terrence's story wasn't just about justice. It was about exposing a structure built to suffocate kids like him before they even knew how brilliant they were. Rachel's phone buzzed again, a new message from the same anonymous number. This time it wasn't a file, it was a single line of text. "You think the memes are bad? Wait till you see the videos." The first to decode the equation wasn't a celebrity professor or a Silicon Valley genius. It was a retired black mathematician in Tulsa named Dr. Harold Gaines, who stumbled across the Reddit thread while sipping tea in his small, book-crammed apartment. At first he thought it was clickbait, another overhyped math prodigy moment that would vanish by morning. But something about the structure of the equation caught his eye. The symmetry, the layers, the whisper of something new hiding inside something familiar. He enlarged the image, took out a notepad, began scribbling. An hour later his tea had gone cold, and his hands were trembling. Because Terrence hadn't just solved something, he'd rewritten the rules that held it together. By noon the next day, Dr. Gaines had posted a formal breakdown on Twitter, tagging MIT, Harvard, Princeton, and Stanford. His post read, "Whoever Terrence Holloway is, this young brother just shifted the field. His model challenges non-linear equilibrium theory, in a way I've never seen. It's time academia paid attention, and not just for the math." That tweet went viral in under an hour. Holloway theorem began trending nationwide. Mathematicians, physicists, and data scientists weighed in with stunned reactions. "I've spent 20 years on this theory, and this kid just leapfrogged it. This is what black brilliance looks like when it's not filtered by bias." The future of STEM just changed its name to Terrence Holloway. Black intellectual Twitter, often divided by disciplines, fields, and arguments, unified behind one message: protect him, elevate him, and don't let them erase him. Inside the Holloway apartment, Terrence sat frozen at the kitchen table, his laptop screen a chaotic mess of blinking notifications, emails, interview requests and comment threads stretching into the thousands. His name was no longer just a punchline. It was a movement, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because fame, even when well-meaning, felt a lot like pressure. And pressure wasn't new. He'd felt it every time someone mispronounced his name during roll call. Every time a teacher sighed when he raised his hand. Every time he was told he talked too confidently for a student his background. He stared at the trending hashtags. Holloway equation. Hidden genius. System failed him. None of them made him feel better. Ronald watched from the doorway, arms crossed, sensing the storm in his son's chest before it ever reached his face. "They finally see you," he said quietly. Terrence shook his head. "They see the math, Dad. Not me." Ronald stepped closer. "You are the math." Meanwhile, Rachel Wynne was sitting in her newsroom's tiny sound booth, headphones tight around her ears, recording voiceover for the podcast episode she had decided to rush into production. The world watched a young black student get mocked in a classroom. What it didn't expect was for that same student to challenge 40 years of established math theory in return. His name is Terrence Holloway, and his silence wasn't weakness. It was weight. She hit pause, leaned back, and let the words settle. In less than 24 hours, the podcast would be downloaded, over 800,000 times. But something still felt wrong. Not with the story, but with how quickly the world was trying to own it. Universities started reaching out, not to apologize, but to claim. Tech CEOs offered internships. Influencers tagged his name. A major streaming platform floated the idea of a documentary, all of it happening fast, without asking what Terrence wanted. Rachel knew better. The same institutions that ignored him would now try to profit from him. She opened her laptop and started drafting a second article. This one not about math but about extraction. About how gifted black youth are used as symbols. Their stories held up like trophies while their trauma gets edited out of the frame. Back at Millstone High, the teacher's lounge was unusually quiet. No memes, no laughter. The same faculty members, who once exchanged racist jokes, were now deleting messages, scrubbing chats, panicking. The group chat Rachel exposed had leaked. And it wasn't just national news. It was on the evening broadcast. Mr. Dalton sat alone in his classroom, blinds closed, his lesson plan untouched. His inbox was filled with hate mail. But what bothered him most weren't the threats. It was the silence from the district. No one had defended him. No one had returned his calls. They were ready to let him burn so they wouldn't have to. His hand hovered over his resignation letter, already typed and sitting on the screen. But something in him still resisted. "This wasn't my fault," he muttered. But deep down, for the first time in years, he didn't believe it. And then came the decode. The real one. A YouTube channel run by 3 PhD mathematicians uploaded a 20-minute video titled, "We Broke the Holloway Equation. Here's what it really means." It was simple, accessible, and powerful. They explained how Terrence had bypassed traditional calculus structures and proposed a new path through equilibrium models that could reshape how climate systems and AI prediction tools were designed. In other words, it had real-world impact. And the best part? He did it without a lab, without a mentor, without access. He did it with pencil and paper in a bedroom above a laundromat. One of the professors in the video ended with, "He isn't the future. He's the correction to a past that's failed too many like him." Terrence watched the video quietly, his eyes flicking between the screen and the window where the sun had started to rise. "Why does this feel heavier now?" he whispered. Ronald, seated across from him, said, "Because light weighs more when it finally finds you." There was a knock at the door. Ronald stood, cautious. He opened it slowly. A tall, clean-cut man in a charcoal gray suit stood there, holding a leather case and a thin folder. His presence was calm but precise, like a man used to saying important things in quiet tones. "Mr. Holloway?" the man asked. "Yes? My name is Anthony Rhodes. I'm here on behalf of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We've been following your son's work closely. We'd like to talk about Terrence's future, and about what we're prepared to offer him." Terrence stepped into the hallway, blinking at the suited man, unsure if he was real. Rhodes looked directly at him. "You're not just a student anymore. You're a contributor, possibly one of the youngest in the last 3 decades. And MIT wants to make sure you get to keep building, without permission, without apology." Terrence didn't speak. He just nodded, slowly. Ronald's hand found his son's shoulder. A lifetime of invisible labor in that one gesture. And finally, someone had come not to mock, not to threaten, not to silence, but to offer. We saw what you wrote, but who left the second equation? Terrence looked up, confused. There was only one equation, he said. Rhodes raised an eyebrow. Not according to the footage we received this morning. Behind him, a black car idled quietly. And in the back seat, unseen, sat someone watching Terrence through a tinted window, holding the original photo of the whiteboard. Only now there were two signatures at the bottom. And the second one matched Ronald's handwriting. The morning after the MIT envelope arrived, Terrence's name was on every news ticker in America. Cable news anchors debated his brilliance. Education panels discussed racial barriers in advanced math. Radio hosts speculated on what his equation might mean for climate data modeling. His face, a still frame from the viral classroom video, appeared in articles from the New York Times to niche science blogs, each captioned with phrases like, "The janitor's son who broke the equation," "Genius or fluke," "Prodigy from the projects." Terrence Holloway had become a name, but not a person. Because while the headlines told one story, the internet told another. His Instagram was hacked within hours. His private photos, even childhood ones, began circulating in Discord servers and anonymous message boards. Someone posted a screenshot of his apartment building. Another posted his school schedule. A thread titled "Who Really Wrote the Holloway Equation" gained over 60,000 views in 24. The comments turned darker by the hour. Affirmative action genius. Let's see if he still solves math problems when he's 6 feet under. Time to clean the chalkboard with his blood. Ronald watched it unfold from the kitchen, phone in hand, rage held down like a lid on boiling water. Terrence didn't flinch. Not when his face appeared on neo-Nazi forums. Not when a deep fake of him appeared in a fake interview, edited to make it sound like he hated white people. Not when a police cruiser parked outside the building for neighborhood patrol the morning after the threats started. He didn't flinch. But something in him broke. Millstone High responded the only way they knew how, with optics. Within 48 hours of Terrence trending, the principal issued a memo. Due to ongoing media attention and classroom disruptions, Terrence Holloway will be placed on temporary academic leave for the remainder of the semester to preserve the learning environment for all students. The words hit like glass shattering in a quiet room. They weren't offering protection. They were exiling him. They framed it as a safety measure, but the real reason wasn't safety. It was control. Terrence had drawn too much attention, not the kind of attention Millstone High liked. He wasn't a football recruit. He wasn't a science fair poster boy. He was a black kid who'd embarrassed the faculty and dismantled an entire academic structure without even trying. Ronald stormed into the main office the moment the memo dropped. His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It came out cold and steady, the kind of tone built over years of watching institutions swallow people whole. "You didn't disrupt your learning environment," Ronald told them. He exposed what you called learning was really gatekeeping. They didn't argue. They just nodded, smiled politely, and handed him a copy of the suspension letter. For the next 2 days, Terrence barely spoke. He stayed in his room with the door shut, the curtains drawn, no laptop, no phone, just notebooks, pens, scribbles that stretched across walls like graffiti, as if his mind had detached from time and was now racing toward something no one could see. Ronald checked in hourly. "Eat something. Stretch your legs. Talk to me, son." But Terrence barely moved. When he did speak, it was cryptic. "They're watching everything. I need to finish it before they can twist it." "What's it?" Ronald asked. Terrence didn't answer. By the second night, Ronald knocked and got no response. When he opened the door, the room was empty. The window was open. The notebooks were gone. So was the envelope from MIT. The next 36 hours moved like molasses. Ronald filed a missing persons report. The police asked questions with suspicion in their eyes, not concern. Questions like, does he have any gang affiliations? And could he be hiding drugs? Ronald wanted to scream. Rachel Wynn showed up the next morning with a thermal coffee and panic in her voice. "You think they took him?" she asked. Ronald didn't blink. "No. If they took him, they'd leave a message." Rachel pulled out her phone. "There's something you need to see." On her screen was a post from a locked Reddit thread titled "Before They Kill the Proof." It was a blurry photo, Terrence's handwriting, scattered across a whiteboard, flanked by mathematical scribbles so dense they looked like art. Below it a caption. The system called it a disruption. I call it a correction. Rachel looked up, eyes wide. He posted this 30 minutes ago from a location tagged in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Ronald leaned back, breath catching. He went to MIT. Terence had arrived in Cambridge on a borrowed train ticket. His hoodie pulled low, eyes scanning every corner. No press, no entourage, just him, a 17-year-old, with the world's expectations on his back and fire in his veins. He walked the perimeter of MIT in silence, clutching a backpack filled with his latest notes. When he reached the door of the mathematics building, he stood there for 10 minutes without moving. Then he walked inside. A junior faculty member named Dr. Shirin LeMay recognized him instantly. From the equations, not the news. "You're him," she whispered. "I need a board," Terence said. She led him to a lecture hall. Empty, clean, whiteboards stretching from floor to ceiling. He pulled out his notebook, flipped to the middle page, and began to write. Not the first equation. Not the Holloway theorem. A new one, different, more aggressive. This one challenged probability theory itself, a symbolic assault on how systems predicted outcomes based on historical data, a direct attack on every algorithm that said kids like him couldn't succeed. Sharon watched, stunned, as he scribbled faster and faster, his hands smudged with ink, his face pale with exhaustion. He didn't look up for nearly 2 hours. When he did, the entire board was covered. "I need to get this out before they bury me," he said. "Who's trying to bury you?" she asked. He turned slowly. "All of them." Meanwhile, back in Millstone, the backlash intensified. The same school that suspended Terence now posted an article on its website titled, "Millstone Proud, Honoring Our Gifted Students." It didn't name Terence. It just hinted at students who've recently gained national attention. They were trying to claim him without owning what they'd done to him. Rachel was livid. She drafted a rebuttal article that night. Headline: "You don't get to own what you tried to erase." She paired it with quotes from the leaked faculty chat, Terence's suspension letter, and a voice memo from Ronald. They called him a disruption when he spoke. Now they call him inspiration, 'cause he's quiet again. Terence stayed in Cambridge 2 nights. Shireen helped him hide in a student dorm. He refused to talk much, just kept writing. By the end of the second night, he had filled 4 full whiteboards with interconnected formulas. No one could keep up. One of the professors who visited said softly, "This isn't a theorem. It's a revolution." Terence didn't respond. He just nodded, tired and cold. "I'm going home now," he said. "But I'm not done yet." When Terence returned to his apartment at sunrise, his eyes were hollow, his shoulders squared. He didn't greet his father. He didn't say a word. He walked straight into his room, pinned a single page of notes to the wall, and sat on his bed staring at it. At the top of the page, written in bold black marker, were just 5 chilling words. "This isn't about math anymore." The morning after Terence's return, the world outside their apartment had become a war zone of opinions. Not with guns or armies, but with microphones, headlines, and think pieces that spoke louder than truth itself. Cable news had branded it the math war. A boy's equation had become a national argument. Not about numbers, but about who was allowed to create them. Terence watched it unfold from his laptop, the glow of the screen washing over his expressionless face. Every channel played the same footage. His classroom video, his silence, the viral equation. Only now, it wasn't curiosity driving the coverage. It was skepticism. A distinguished man with silver hair and polished glasses appeared on a morning panel. Dr. Richard Hallstrom, the head of theoretical mathematics at the University of Cambridge, and one of the most respected mathematicians in the world. His tone was polite, but every word cut like a scalpel. "While I commend the enthusiasm surrounding young Terence's work, it's important to maintain academic integrity. Equations of that magnitude don't emerge from high school classrooms. Let's be realistic. Perhaps he adapted concepts he didn't fully understand." The anchor nodded eagerly. "So, you're suggesting it might not be original?" Hallstrom smiled thinly. "Let's just say there's a difference between inspiration and authorship. There's no way a kid like him could have formulated this independently. A kid like him." The phrase echoed through the broadcast, dissected, replayed, captioned, and clipped across social media. Ronald stood behind Terence, his fists tightening. "You hear that? That's what they do. When they can't understand you, they deny you." Terence didn't respond. His jaw flexed once, but his eyes never left the screen. Within hours, talk shows and podcasts joined the chorus. Some called for verification, others for humility. But many, too many, spoke with the same patronizing doubt, masked as concern. Maybe he just got lucky. Could he have copied it from somewhere? We should be careful before celebrating mediocrity disguised as brilliance. And then came the politicians. One senator tweeted, "This is what happens when schools prioritize social justice over standards." A conservative radio host mocked the idea of a janitor's son rewriting math, saying, "Maybe his dad cleaned up the chalkboard and accidentally discovered it too." Each word was a bruise disguised as commentary. Rachel Wynne sat in the Common Angle office, surrounded by stacks of evidence. Dalton's emails, the leaked group chat, the memos. She'd watched media narratives twist Terrence's story into a spectacle. She opened a new document and began typing furiously. "It's not about plagiarism. It's about prejudice. They can't imagine a black genius from poverty because their system wasn't built to recognize one. They built their equations to measure privilege, not potential." She hit save and sent it to her editor. The story would publish at dawn, but for now the night belonged to noise. At MIT, the faculty lounge buzzed with tension. A panel of professors had gathered behind closed doors, reviewing Terrence's original notes, timestamps, and data. Dr. Ellen Westcott, the Harvard professor who had first recognized the theorem, stood at the head of the table. Her voice was calm but unyielding. "The plagiarism claim is baseless," she said. "We've verified the metadata on his files. His notebook sketches predate any known model of this concept by at least 8 months." A professor across from her adjusted his glasses. "Then why is Hallstrom going public with it?" "Because discrediting him is easier than admitting the field failed to see him." Ellen closed the folder. "This isn't about math anymore. It's about territory." Back in Cambridge, Terrence scrolled through thousands of mentions under his name. His inbox was flooded with journalists, professors, and hate mail in equal measure. He clicked one email, from a student forum thread. It read, "He's not even in college. How could he understand something that took us years? This isn't about race. It's about reality." Terrence closed the laptop quietly. Reality. That was the word they always used when they meant limitation. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the empty parking lot below. "They'll never stop, will they?" he said. Ronald leaned against the doorway. "Not till they break you, or till you show them you can't be broken." Terrence turned. "What if they twist it all before I can finish what I started? Then you make it so loud they can't silence you again." Their eyes met. Father and son, two men who had lived two versions of the same fight. That evening, Hallstrom doubled down. He released a 22-page public document titled Preliminary Analysis of the Holloway Equation, in which he claimed distinct similarities between Terrence's proof and an unpublished European paper he himself had written in. The implication was clear: plagiarism, dressed in academic vocabulary. Within hours, the document was everywhere. News anchors quoted it. Thinkers debated it. The math community fractured overnight. Some defending Terrence fiercely, others quietly distancing themselves. For every scientist who said, "He's authentic," another whispered, "But what if he isn't?" And amid that chaos, the same thread ran through every comment. "A kid like him." The hate turned coordinated. Terrence's inbox filled with racial slurs and doctored screenshots claiming he'd admitted to stealing the equation. Anonymous emails threatened to end his fraud. His mother's old photos were stolen from social media and used in memes. The boy who had been mocked for being invisible was now drowning in visibility, the wrong kind. Rachel called Ronald late that night. "They're manufacturing doubt faster than truth can move," she said. "We need something concrete. MIT has to speak. If they stay silent, they let this smear become history." Ronald's voice was tired, but steady. "They'll speak when they're ready. Terrence isn't hiding anymore." But Rachel could hear something in his tone. Fear. The kind that comes when you've seen systems swallow truth whole. 3 days later, a press advisory email landed in journalists' inboxes across the country. MIT to hold press conference regarding Holloway equation integrity review. Location: Cambridge Campus Auditorium. Time: 10. Every news network cleared airtime. Reporters flooded the campus. Students lined the sidewalks holding handmade signs. "Let the genius speak. You can't plagiarize the future. Hands off Holloway." Inside the auditorium, cameras clicked. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, curiosity laced with judgment. Ronald sat in the front row, wearing his uniform jacket, hands clasped together. Beside him, Rachel adjusted her recorder. Then, Dr. Ellen Westcott stepped to the podium. "Thank you for being here," she began. "Over the past several weeks, there have been questions surrounding the authenticity of Terrence Holloway's equation. MIT has conducted a full-scale investigation involving timestamp verification, cross-referencing unpublished works, and digital forensic analysis. The room was silent. Ellen paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd. The results are definitive. She looked directly at the cameras. Every component of the Holloway equation is original. Every step, every line, every variable. The algorithm traces back to Terrence's private notebooks and files. No plagiarism, no fabrication, only innovation. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Reporters began shouting questions. Cameras flashed. Rachel's heart pounded as she captured the moment. Terrence, sitting quietly near the back, lowered his head, not in defeat, but in relief. Ellen continued, "The equation will be formally published under his authorship, and the academic community owes him not just apology, but recognition." Ronald exhaled deeply, his hand gripping the edge of his seat. But before applause could begin, Ellen held up one more page. "There is, however, one discovery that changes what we thought we knew." A second equation, handwritten, same style, same ink, was found appended to the file in Terrence's folder. The crowd murmured. She looked toward Terrence. "It's not his handwriting." Terrence froze as the auditorium erupted in confusion. Cameras zoomed in on his face. The second equation appeared on the projector, and at the bottom, in small, unmistakable script, was a signature. R. Holloway. Ronald's name. He stood in the crowd, stunned, as every flashbulb in the room turned toward him. The moment the second equation appeared on the screen, the world seemed to pause, not in awe, but in confusion. Murmurs rippled across the auditorium like distant thunder. The name at the bottom, R. Holloway, wasn't just surprising, it was disorienting. In the center of it all stood Ronald, frozen, his body upright but spirit rattled. The lights felt hotter now, brighter, harsh. For years, he had lived in the periphery, pushing mops, replacing light bulbs, nodding silently at teachers who barely noticed him. Now every eye in the room stared straight at him. Terrence, seated in the third row, looked up at his father. He didn't say a word, didn't move, but his eyes, wide, wounded, asked the one question no son ever wants to ask. "Did you do this?" Ellen Westcott raised her voice at the podium. "We're currently reviewing the implications of this discovery. The content of the second equation is complex, distinct, and compelling. We do not know when or how it was added to the original file." The press erupted. Reporters stood shouting over one another. Did the father contribute to the theorem? Was this a cover-up? Is the Holloway equation a collaboration? But Ronald wasn't answering questions. His throat was dry, his mind spinning. He hadn't written that equation. He hadn't even seen it before. But there was no denying the signature. It was his. Every curve of the R, every sharp flick of the A. How had it gotten there? That night, the headlines changed course. The janitor's signature. New questions surround Holloway's genius. MIT confirms math breakthrough. But who wrote what? Father and son, the equation of controversy. Back at Millstone High, the ripple of public chaos reached the halls like a second earthquake. The students in Terrence's class, the same ones who once laughed, filmed, and joked, were now split clean down the middle. Some, shaken by the media firestorm and MIT's confirmation, began reflecting on what they'd done, on what they hadn't said, on what they laughed at when they should have listened. "I didn't think it was that serious," one student told a local news crew. "We were just messing around. Nobody thought he'd actually be that smart." The confession wasn't redemption, just recognition, the kind that comes too late to matter. Other students doubled down. They flooded group chats with bitter messages. "He's not a genius. He's a scam. Bet his dad stole it and gave it to him. All this attention just 'cause he's black." They said it out loud now. The mask of neutrality had slipped. In room 3C, the walls felt smaller. The laughter had disappeared, but the judgment hadn't. Mr. Dalton's chair sat empty. The district had suspended him pending investigation. But Dalton didn't go quietly. He issued a statement through his lawyer, plastered across every local paper. "This is a classic case of reverse racism. I was made into a scapegoat by a school desperate to protect its image and push a narrative. My joke was taken out of context. I have always treated my students equally." Rachel read the statement with clenched teeth. "Equally?" she muttered under her breath. "You erased them equally." Dalton had hired a high-profile attorney and announced plans to sue the school, claiming defamation, career damage, and discrimination. In the press, he positioned himself as a victim, a white teacher attacked by woke culture. His story gained traction among conservative media outlets. One anchor even declared him a martyr for free speech. The same teacher who laughed when Terence was humiliated was now painting himself as the one oppressed. Meanwhile, Terence had stopped speaking to most people. Even Rachel's texts went unanswered. Ronald tried to connect, but Terence barely came out of his room. He wasn't angry. Not at his father. Not openly. But something in him had closed. Locked. The second equation had cracked more than public trust. It had shaken the one thing Terence needed most. Clarity. He couldn't explain how it got there. He couldn't even prove it wasn't his father. And worst of all, part of him wondered if the world wanted this version of the story more. A gifted father and son. A clean, digestible narrative. A legacy passed down. But that wasn't the truth. Not this time. At school, the hallway bulletin board, once filled with college acceptance letters, now featured a poster of Terence, a photo from his childhood, smiling in a library, with the words, "Pride of Millstone." The same students who laughed at him now posed in front of the poster, tagging it on social media. "I always knew he was going to be famous. My classmate's a genius. I was in the room when he changed math." Terence saw the posts. He said nothing. One student, though, couldn't stay silent. Her name was Aaliyah James. Quiet, sharp, observant. She had transferred out of Mr. Dalton's class 2 years ago. No one ever asked why. But now, she emailed Rachel directly. "I have something you need to see," the message read. "It's about Dalton." Rachel met her after school in a corner booth at a diner just outside the city. Aaliyah's hands trembled as she handed over a flash drive. "2 years ago, I recorded something. I didn't know what to do with it back then. I was afraid. But not now." Rachel plugged it into her laptop, heart pounding. The video opened. It was grainy, shot from a phone hidden behind a textbook. But the audio was clear. Inside the Millstone High faculty lounge, Mr. Dalton could be heard laughing with 2 other teachers. "You see the new transfer? The black girl with the 'I know better' stare? Another activist in the making. They'll probably put her in gifted just to hit the quota." More laughter. "I call it the 3B policy. Braids, black and barely passing." Aaliyah's voice cracked. "That was me they were talking about." Rachel didn't speak. She couldn't. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, fists clenched. This wasn't just a career-ending clip. It was a confession. Not just of bias, of racism, of rot. The next morning, Rachel uploaded the video with a single caption, "This is who taught Terence." Within minutes, it exploded. Dalton, exposed, trended worldwide. The school district released a statement suspending him indefinitely and launching a full investigation into past complaints. Parents demanded resignations. Students staged walkouts. Teachers who once laughed stayed silent. Millstone High, the school that tried to hide, was now on fire. That evening, as Terence finally emerged from his room, Ronald handed him a letter, not an email, but a handwritten envelope delivered by courier. Terence opened it, read the first line, and blinked. "The President of the United States requests your presence at the White House to discuss STEM equity and educational reform." But behind the envelope was another slip of paper. A note with just 4 words, typed on plain cardstock. "They're not done yet." The morning of the rally was gray and cold, the kind of November chill that made people pull their jackets tighter and speak in shorter sentences. News vans lined the curb outside City Hall, their satellite dishes like metal flowers opening to the sky. Volunteers handed out flyers printed with Terence's face and the words, "See the genius, stop the erasure." A crowd grew quicker than anyone expected. Students, teachers who had resigned in shame, black mathematicians from across the state, parents clutching placards, activists with megaphones, and a scattering of local elected officials who smelled momentum and wanted to be on the right side of history. Ronald Holloway arrived early, uniform jacket replaced with a plain dark coat, badge clipped inside his shirt like an old medal he didn't need to display. He carried nothing with him but a small stack of index cards and a worn pair of gloves in his pocket. People recognized him from the viral footage, the janitor who had raised a mathematician, but the faces in the crowd were not interested in celebrity. They were hungry for truth. He stood backstage, behind a plywood podium, the press light warm on his face through the thin curtain. He could hear the crowd murmuring, the way a tide shifts and gathers force. The organizer next to him tapped Ronald's shoulder and said quietly, "Whenever you are ready." Ronald folded and smoothed the cards in his hand. He had rehearsed the speech in the mirror for nights, not to polish his words but to make sure they sounded like himself and not like something somebody else would put in his mouth. His life had taught him that people liked neat narratives, that heroes fit into headlines and villains fit into neat boxes. Tonight he wanted something messier. Honesty. He walked to the microphone. The roar that met him was not the raucous laughter of a classroom. It was something sober and fierce. People shouted his name. Someone started a chant. Terrence, 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 Terrence. It swelled, and hundreds of voices folded into it like wind over a field. For a second Ronald felt the room tilt. He had been invisible for years. Now sound made him visible in a way he had never asked for. He cleared his throat, and the noise faded as if someone had drawn a curtain. "My name is Ronald Holloway," he said. His voice was low at first, steady as bread dough being kneaded. He spoke of mops and midnight shifts, of fluorescent lights that hummed like old radios, of the little victories, a classroom spotless before exams, a hallway swept free so a student could walk without worrying about scuffed shoes. He spoke of the dignity he carried, not because the world gave it to him, but because it was all he had to offer his son. Then he spoke of silence. He told them about afternoons when Terrence would come home and sit at the kitchen table with a notebook, fingers covered in graphite, eyes distant. He told them about the way laughter had followed his son from a whiteboard in room 3C into their living room, and how that laughter had no echo of apology. He said the word behavioral observations out loud, and watched the crowd react as if he had named a ghost. "There's a calculus to being invisible," Ronald said. "It's been taught to us quietly, institutionally. We are supposed to fit neat boxes. We are supposed to accept the polite jokes while our children shrink in the corner." He paused, letting the line land like a stone in still water. Somewhere to his left, someone shouted, "Preach." He spoke of pride, of the habit his father taught him to keep his back straight, even as the world tried to shove him sideways. He spoke of small kindnesses that hadn't been small for them. A teacher who once stayed after school to help Terrence with a problem, a librarian who recommended a book, an elderly black professor who sent an encouragement email. He named them as if summoning witnesses. And then he told them about the crumpled cartoon he had found in Terrence's backpack, the one signed in the corner by Mr. Dalton. He read part of it aloud, the crude stick figures, the mocking caption. When he said the teacher's name, a ripple moved through the crowd, the way wind moves through wheat. People hissed, their anger tempered by a grim kind of recognition. Ronald didn't shout. He didn't accuse with a fist. He did the thing he had been taught to do when loudness wouldn't help. He told the truth plainly, and let it work. "You learn to carry a silence as if it were armor," he said. "I carried it for my son so he could learn it too. But silence cost us. My boy's peace, his nights, his right to be seen as himself." His voice cracked, and he swallowed it down. "I learned tonight that being visible doesn't mean the world will be kind, but it means your name will be in the wind." People wept. People yelled. A teacher from another district stepped forward and embraced him, saying something about standing by the Holloways. Cameras recorded the moment, and within an hour clips of Ronald's speech had thousands of shares. His line about silence being armor trended. Strangers called the Holloway apartment to offer donations and tutoring help. An online fundraiser collected tens of thousands in a day to support Terrence's coursework and protection. And yet behind the scenes, the reaction in the offices that mattered most was the opposite of applause. At the school board meeting that afternoon, Principal Hargrave's face was the color of theater lights, too white, too bright. He opened his mouth to advocate for reconciliation, but the board members were already drafting memos. "This rally," one said, voice clipped, "will compel families to rethink their support." Another worried about donors. The superintendent, a man who had made his career in careful phrasing and slow moves, tapped a screen and made no eye contact as he read the trending captions. "Control the narrative," he said. It was less an order than a reflex. By evening, Ronald's viral speech had been edited, re-uploaded, clipped into short sound bites. One version cropped his words to remove his most pointed criticisms and threaded them between images of Mr. Dalton's resignation. Another added an amateur subtitle that twisted behavioral observations into discipline issues. A conservative talk show replayed a clip and overlaid a commentator's sneer. A janitor plays victim. Ronald watched none of it live. He was at home, eating a sandwich Terrence had made for him, in a rare moment. The son had stepped into the kitchen. They sat at the same table where so many tensions had played out, and for the first time in weeks, the silence between them felt less like a stone and more like a bandage. "You did good," Terrence said quietly. Ronald's laugh was small and surprised. "I just said what's true." "Truth goes viral," Terrence answered. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it gets edited. They both chuckled, but it was the quick kind of laugh that waits for a second, then slopes into a frown. 2 days later, an official letter arrived on thick paper stamped by the district attorney's office and routed through the school board's legal counsel. It was the kind of document Ronald had seen only in movies and courtrooms. The envelope smelled faintly of bureaucracy and threat. He opened it with the same care he had used when untying a stubborn knot. Inside was a single-page legal notice, a motion filed by the district, alleging continued disruption and claiming that the school reserved the right to enforce disciplinary measures, including permanent expulsion for students whose extracurricular actions compromised the functioning of school operations and safety. There it was in black type. Intended consequence couched in careful legalese. The notice listed dates, vaguely worded incidents, and a clause about protecting the educational environment. It read like a preemptive strike. It read like a trap. Ronald's hand went cold. He reread the letter. In the margin in small type, an unnamed legal firm advised immediate action.